Welcome to Coach Fireside Chat, the podcast where we strip away the glamour and get straight to the heart of coaching. No scripts, no filters, just honest, raw conversations with coaches who are out there making a real impact. I'm Karl Sandland, your host and growth strategist for coaches. I work with coaches to help them build, scale, and create lasting impact in the industry. And in this podcast, I sit down with experienced coaches to deep dive into their journey, their struggles, their breakthroughs, and their unfiltered take on what it really means to be a coach. Whether you're an aspiring coach looking to grow your practice, or you're searching for the right coach to support your personal or professional transformation, this podcast is for you. No fluff, no sales pitches, just real talk about the coaching world from those who are doing the work and changing lives. So grab a seat by the fire and let's get into it. Hello and welcome to today's Coach Fireside Chat, where we're going to explore the question, is the coaching industry failing people? My wonderful guest today is Jennifer Ann Falandys, an educational consultant, certified trauma and resilience life coach, and coaching mentor with over 25 years experience as a mental health and disability advocate. She's been coaching for 11 years and has a BA in psychology with a background in nonprofit mental health and community outreach. Her mission is to restore integrity, ethical mindfulness, and trauma-informed care to coaching. She believes trust and safety are key to meaningful coaching relationships, where both the coach and client are mutually invested in that process. Jennifer's a strong advocate for change in the coaching industry, exposing predatory pricing, deceptive marketing, and unethical practices. Her work highlights the dangers of untrained coaches working with trauma and the need for higher ethical standards. She specializes in trauma, toxic stress, human behavior, communication, and combining her skills to push for better mental health and coaching practices. She's passionate about reducing harm. She fights for accessible support, patient dignity, and ethical leadership in coaching and mental health spaces. So let's get into it. Welcome, Jennifer. Look, I'm really looking forward to this. I know we've been talking about having this session for a while. I think we're both quite opinionated. I think it's fair to say, and outspoken about the good, bad, and ugly of the coaching industry. But before we dive in, I just want to make it really clear that this conversation is based on our personal views and experiences. Our goal is to explore the bigger issues in the coaching industry and not to call out specifically any person or business. We believe in open and honest discussion to help people make better choices. That's what the discussion is going to be about today. So if you're a coach doing great work with integrity, this isn't about you. If you're a client looking for support, we just want to help you find the best and safest options. So Jennifer, I guess one of the first things that I think coaches may feel themselves, and also people looking for a coach, is that it's at times it just seems so damn expensive, right? And you have to question, is coaching worth it? Is it okay to charge $5,000, $10,000 or more for coaching programs?
I honestly think that it's okay to charge those amounts for coaching. I think this is kind of like a two-pronged answer, because yes, it's okay to charge for those things, but it's important to be able to deliver them and to back up the price with your values and how you deliver, how you sell to people, the buyer's journey and how that goes for them, and sort of the attitude and approach in how you bring people in to work with you. And then the other part of that, I think, is that it seems like the industry prioritizes high, expensive coaching programs, and sort of maybe the industry algorithm, so to speak, kind of hides more affordable options. And so some people, I call it the high ticket highway, because it's very challenging not to want to get in on that right away if that's all you see in your feed when it comes to looking at coaching and what your options are.
If I'm 100% honest, that's pretty much what I was taught. When I first came into the coaching industry, it was very much, high ticket program. If you only sell a couple of those every few weeks, then you're going to be okay. And it was very much, again, about the you'll be okay. There was very little consideration really to what about the clients, right? Will they
Yes.
be okay? It's like, are they going to get the value that they need? Are they going to get that transformation they seek? I don't have a high ticket at all. There's a virtual notion of it. If I had a client who said to me, I want to work with you every single week and I want at least a couple of hours with you, I'd have to actually craft a specific product for that, because I just don't have that anymore. I just have my medium and low ticket monthly options, because it removes some of the barriers and it removes some of the risk. There's too many coaches or companies out there that try and lock people into either payment plans, or they'll lock them into contracts, minimum contracted period. And we have to ask, is it taking advantage of people who are stuck to the extent that they're prepared to spend a lot of money to get out of that pain or challenge that they're in? And it worries me. And it has to worry you too, right?
It does. And to be honest, these types of practices go back to like the early, I think, 1800s. They had people that would come selling tinctures and whatever for whatever ailed you, and they could tell you anything and promise you that cure, and people would buy it. And so over time we've seen companies go down that direction and use these tactics because they know that they work. So it's not necessarily a flaw or a bad thing. It's what we've come to know. And I think one of the biggest issue is trying to change people's mentality and educate them on other ways we could do it without having to rely so heavily on these other tactics. But when they're so prevalent, I think people get scared to let go of them, and they may not know what that could do for their bottom line. And obviously, financially supporting ourselves is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can understand there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of very repeated patterns and methods that we've come to know that have become standard practices. So I can understand how people can get caught up in doing them and continuing to do them without being able to see what is outside of them.
There's definitely an abundance of coaches selling high ticket programs, right? But financially, as far as my business revenue goes, it's been a lot better since I've been doing low ticket and mid ticket, because for one, it makes it more affordable, and it's quite often easier to get clients because it's slightly less risky for them. I feel better about it. And not only that, you're then looking at like recurring revenue models rather than the whole feast and famine. So it takes the pressure off the way you run your business, and it just becomes more of a machine that just feels like it's being oiled rather than has to have a new belt put on it every single month when you've got to go out and get the next 2 high ticket clients. But there's the guilt tactic as well around it, isn't there? There's looking at it from the customer side now, or the prospect side. A lot of coaches seem to hone into that whole fear of missing out. You've really got to do this. You obviously aren't serious about solving this problem then if you aren't prepared to invest this amount, because this is what it takes. So there's a lot of the guilt tactic, isn't there?
I think it goes back to patterns of behaviors that, pain point marketing and like people getting into jams, and then obviously people want solutions, and some people need those solutions right away, so they might be more vulnerable to fall for the pain point marketing. And again, it's just become standard practice. Even in the marketing advice, so to speak, out there, there's a lot of discussion around pain point marketing. And there's less discussion, I think, around what that does to people's nervous systems, especially when they've been burned by coaches before or have some hesitancy and might be vulnerable, and repeated exposures to pain point marketing and pressure does impact the buyer's journey, and also may impact their ability to reach out for help to another coach in the future if they had a difficult experience with somebody who doesn't understand how that hammers into our physiology.
which in itself is actually a bit of a travesty, really, isn't it? Because there are decent service providers, coaches, mentors, therapists out there who are just wanting to be in front of these people to help them for the right reasons. And as you say, if then you've got people who are reluctant to reach out because of that bad experience, nobody wins there at all. And just on the pain point marketing, let's just get super clear on that, because when you said about using pain point marketing, I'm thinking, oh shit, well, hang on a minute. So in my marketing, I point out in some bits the consequence of not doing certain things. It's more the positive side of the benefits of you'll get this, you'll get this, you'll get that, you'll have more time, you'll save costs in, integrating all your systems into one system, all that sort of stuff. But I still do a little bit of consequence marketing. But is that something different? What's the definition of pain marketing?
Yes, I see pain point marketing as you already know someone has a wound. So you write about that wound and you metaphorically stick your finger in it. Because if you up the pressure and you increase the pain, then you're going to get people who are going to take action. And of course we want to get people to take action. But for what intention are they taking that action? What made them take that step? Is that because you stuck your finger in? And so I think that's where I hope that people might pause and reflect that there's other ways to talk about pros and cons and consequences and outcomes and choices of what happens if you don't choose this, or what happens if you need this and you're hesitant about it. There are ways to have that conversation without causing harm or more pain, because a lot of the times people already know what their pain points are, and that's why they're looking for help.
Yeah.
But if you take a wound and you exploit that wound, that's where I hope that people learn to maybe take a pause and consider in their marketing practices what their approach is like.
Thank you for clarifying that for me as well, because I must admit I was starting to panic, because like I say, I do point certain pain points out, but yeah, I certainly don't start poking and prodding open wounds and beat people into submission to want to work with me, far from it. So let's shift slightly then. Let's look at when it goes wrong, or what could go wrong when there's a bad coaching practice in place, when it hurts instead of helps. And I know that you're particularly knowledgeable in this area, coaches who aren't trained to handle trauma.
Yes, I think coaching can help everybody. And I have an interesting background because I come from nonprofit mental health. And so I served people through paid services under a grant for New York State who had nothing. And I was paid through that grant, not paid by my clients. And so they would come to me and I would provide services and support and education. And we did so many wonderful things. And I was helping people, and I continue to help people. But then coming into the online space and transitioning into that and backing against what we have discussed, it was almost like a culture shock for me to see that there's kind of like a disconnect when we don't realize that coaching can help everybody, and that there's less access for services to a variety of different people. And again, I have nothing against high ticket coaching. I want to disclaim that right here. I just want there to be a wider range of support available to different people. And I think that's when it starts to be hurtful, when we prioritize who we can help and we label why that is.
I think a common thread will be there are clearly not enough services available in order to serve the number of people who need those services, right? Which in a way almost creates a bit of a breeding ground, doesn't it, for some of the perhaps more unsavory people to pop up and think, right, well, I'll fill that gap. I'm a trauma coach. I can help you with this. I can help you with that. And, they might not be ready for that. They might do more harm than good. And they can actually leave that person in a worse state and have charged them the privilege for leaving them in a worse state.
Yes.
Which is so many different ways of wrong, right?
I fully believe that coaching can bridge gaps in care, especially knowing that there's so many people on waiting lists. But I think that should we do that, and in the process of doing that, it's important to understand our scope of practice. It's important to understand the difference between coaching and therapy. It's important to recognize that in many cases, our lived experience alone is not enough, and that when trauma comes up for people in a coaching session, it doesn't tap you on the shoulder as a coach and ask you, are you prepared to handle this? Like, you're in it with somebody. When it's happening and things come up, you're in it. And so, are you able to have the capacity and the knowledge and the wherewithal to support your clients who are maybe having an active trauma response? We don't talk a lot about aftercare in coaching. And, trauma is not limited to a trauma survivor. It can come up in corporate coaching. It can come up in business coaching. I talk about entrepreneurial trauma. There's so many different ways that trauma can show up, and especially given how we market, that can also open the door right there if it is not done in a way that supports people's nervous systems and invites them into a offer, and instead of using like brute force tactics or the pain points, and you're already setting people off. And so it's very important, like I share, to start from a place of prioritizing safety and trust right from the get-go. And that includes right when we start marketing to people and how we connect with people and the experience that we leave them with in the process of their consideration of working with us. That might help people say yes rather than ghost or say, I thought about this and it's not for me. I believe if we focused more on that, we could get a lot more authentic yeses rather than putting people into a state of stress and having an outcome be yes under that state.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's going off at a slight tangent, but it's not too dissimilar from some of the discipline of customer experience, where you're putting your customer first and understanding their needs, their latent needs, and
Yes.
presenting in front of them and understanding from their perspective what it is they need, rather than just trying to give them something that you want to give them. I always try, with all conversations that I have with my prospects, with my clients, I always try and put them at the center of it, because ultimately, when you've got that connection, you have that trust, what you're going to discuss is clearly going to be more impactful and it's clearly going to have a better outcome for them as a primary concern, which ultimately as a byproduct will mean that it will have a better outcome for me. And I think sometimes people lose track of the fact that just because you're prioritizing the customer or the lead or the prospect, it doesn't mean that you've deprioritized yourself. It just means that you've put them in first place, and you will probably get the result because the behaviors that you exhibit will be the right things that get the right behaviors that you're looking for anyway, without underhand tactics, without the what you've got to buy today, without the no, you're locked in for 12 months, go and get a loan for it if it's important to you, without all of those silly tactics. They aren't needed, right?
And I think this is also why trauma-informed care and coaching is important to me. And a lot of people might not see the correlation, especially in business coaching. How does trauma-informed care relate? But at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all have nervous systems, and we all have different ways that we experience our feelings and our thoughts and our sensations in our bodies as those humans. And so our approach and how we treat and speak to people does have an overall impact on client experience, your audience experience, who you're talking to and how you're talking to them.
And I think that there's 100% correlation between how you make somebody feel and the behaviors they exhibit and their alignment with actually what your end goal is, right? And this isn't about being manipulative, but this is, if you are genuinely caring and want to do the right thing by somebody and you have the skills to help them, then you will be able to articulate it in a way that makes them make the right decision, whether you are right for them, if they trust you, if they believe you can get you there, and if it works for them financially, right?
Yes. And as a society, we've prioritized things in a very transactional way rather than in a relational way. So sometimes we forget how to be relational first. and we're prioritizing in our minds because we're humans and this is how we operate. You know what we know, and that's, again, not a flaw. It is human. It is human nature for us to prioritize things differently. But, we forget to be relational first sometimes.
That's definitely something that I see a lot of. And it's not that I sit here being judgmental, but I do see at times some of the conversations or the way in which people are interacting with each other. And I'm thinking, my God, they're never going to speak to you again, let alone how you've made them feel with what you've just
Yes.
written back to them. And I just feel there's no need for it. There's no place for it. Let's look at the other side of things. So, what does honest, ethical coaching look like? What could a potential coachee expect if it's done right, if it's done in a safe way? What would that look like?
I think that I would like to see more transparency, more honesty. And these are things, again, some things that are taught where if we omit some things, this is how it's supposed to work. But again, not a flaw. It's just what we've come to learn over time because it works. But to see prices maybe listed up front, to be transparent about what to expect and what the delivery process is like, right down to the fine details, whether or not there is any further costs that someone will have to incur during the course of being a part of the program. No surprises with any fees or additional, oh, you need this software or, something else that should be disclosed up front. And the coaches should be able to answer questions, any question that you have, including if someone asks about budget options. I mean, in today's world of uncertainty, financially and otherwise, I think the budget question may come up more frequently. And this is part of being human in the times we're living in. There's so many people that are only living paycheck to paycheck, or if they are having a good run, it only takes one thing to change. And I think we should account for that in the process of inviting people to work with us.
But there are many that don't. So, for example, all of my plans are counselable anytime. They can stay and work with me as long as they want, or they can decide that they don't want to work with me anymore. There's no contractual tie-ins. There's a few clients that I've taken on a journey and they've hit hardship within a month. It's like, oh, I've got you covered this month then. I've not asked them to then double pay the next month. I've valued that customer and I want to take them on that journey. And I think it's all about the relationship, right? And the relationship should be more than just the transaction. Because if you just become fascinated with the transaction, then all you're doing as a service provider is trying to deliver that outcome as quickly and cheaply as possible. And that is absolutely not in the best interests of your client or the person that you're trying to build that relationship with, right?
Yeah.
So what are the key things that you would suggest people should start to open their eyes a little bit to and get a little bit more curious about if they're thinking of engaging with a coach?
Well, one of the things I learned is so many of us share mutual groups, mutual Facebook groups, So what I've learned is to look at how they respond to people in the group and to also be mindful that you may be on a call with, might be in the same group that you're in. So if you go into the group afterward and you make a big post about how it went down with that person and they recognize themselves in that, that's something to be mindful of. Since we share such a large space and we're all sort of interconnected in the industry in some way, I would look at the comments, look at the posts. If they have ads, look at the comments on the ads and see how they were responded to, whether or not they were left hanging. If they make big promises, can they answer certain questions? And if they ask you to ask them questions, but they don't answer in a way that feels good to you or makes you take a second guess, that might be an invitation to take a pause. I would be mindful of anyone who says if you don't invest in this, or if you don't raise your price, you don't want it bad enough, or you don't believe in yourself.
Or it doesn't mean enough to you, or it's not as big of a
Yes.
challenge as, all of those
Yes, you're not going to
typical.
be successful if you don't do it this way. I'm living proof. I'm very outside the box, and I know that people can be successful in ways that may not look the same or as repeatedly highlighted as we see out there. So it is possible, but don't let people get in your head. And I know that is so hard, but people sometimes count on sneezing on you to give you the imposter flu, and then they know that you might be more susceptible to buying from them because now you have it in your mind, a seed of doubt.
Sorry, I'd laughed because I've never heard of that imposter flu. I've never heard that little analogy, which I think I might have to pinch that off you unless you've trademarked or copyrighted that, because that's particularly good. But it is so true, right? There's often an element of shaming or guilting people. And if you've got to do that, there's something seriously wrong with what you're saying or selling or doing. The fact that you've got to try and create that false dependency, it's almost holding hostage.
Yes.
So there's some really, really good things that people can look out for. And I love the fact that you mentioned there about the whole, if they're skating around the answer of a question that you've asked, or making you feel somewhat confused or perhaps silly for asking that question, all of those sorts of behaviors as well are a good indicator, really, aren't they? That perhaps the
Yes.
person's not being quite so open.
If someone says, this is not the time for us to cover that now, well, why not?
You should go at the customer's pace or the prospect's pace. At the end of the day, and again, this is probably going to be an unpopular statement, but you are there to serve them in their decision-making process, right? You are still serving them even when you are on a sales call or a negotiation with them. You're still serving them. You're still trying to give them the things that they need in order for them to make a good decision. So stop feeding them the bullshit and hiding stuff from them, because that's just creating a false narrative that they're going to make a decision from, that's not going to get the outcome that everybody wants.
Yes. We're counting on stress physiology here, and
Yeah.
that in itself feels off to me.
100% agree. So expensive coaching programs. It's not that I think either of us are saying they shouldn't exist. Again, like I said earlier, if I had a customer who really wanting to work with me every week or every few days or something, I would craft something specific for them. I would create something I don't have, and it would be a high ticket offer, because there has to still be this balance between how much time I have available in my calendar and how many people I have to share that across. So at times people will have to pay a premium if they want to demand more of my calendar. I get that. That's good finances within business. I totally get that. But what we shouldn't do is take away people's freedom to choose, right? I think at times coaches feel really pressured into big investments, certainly when they're first starting off. I'm not ashamed to say I've probably spent 50, 60,000 in my first few years on training, accreditations that actually I now feel don't mean anything, marketing, sales programs, coaches, mentors. I've done what I guess a new coach is led to believe is required in order to be ready for the industry. But the irony is, all of that you're being fed that you need to do is teaching you the exact opposite of how you need to be when you are feeling mentally ready to then be that coach that you need to be, right?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is discernment as a skill. And there's a difference between having everyday natural life discernment and being able to make choices that impact our everyday lives. And then there's discernment for the industry, and when you're within the industry, for coaching and business, because coaching and business are together, but they're also separate. And not everybody has discernment to make decisions that relate to building a business if they've never done that before, or haven't had to make those larger considerations. And then there's the other side of it when you enroll in a coaching program. So not everyone has a certain level of discernment, and we should help people and give them more autonomy to choose what is best for them, and to understand that people might not have a level of discernment rather than count on it to make a sale. Just understand it from a human to human perspective rather than a opportunity perspective.
But again, it's something that seems to be missing. It almost feels unusual having to point it out because we feel it, we believe it, but then it might actually be quite surprising to some people to hear it because it's not what's common. It's not the common thought, the common belief, the common practice that a lot of coaches, mentors, business owners will exhibit. So
Yes.
I think it's fair to say, well, certainly my belief is that the coaching industry is a little bit screwed up at the moment. I think there's too many bad practices out there by some quite big influential companies taking and teaching the new generation of coaches that this is the way that it should be done.
Yeah.
But I think the people who have been around for a lot longer, or people who are perhaps a little bit more mature or have been in business or in senior positions, we sort of get the understanding of the importance of that people connection. And we tend to remove the transaction to a certain extent, and it's about building that relationship. And that certainly doesn't seem to be the key priority of how a lot of coaches are now entering the market. And I think that's really sad, because my observation or my interpretation of that is that coaches will start to leave the industry because they don't want to be associated with something that's perhaps in their minds gone a little bit bad. There's a lot of people who will leave because it doesn't feel a safe, normal space anymore. And I think that's really sad. I think it's very, very sad.
Yes. I can see that for myself just over the last 7 years, how things have changed. And I did drop the coach title for a while.
Did
I
you?
even walked away from it. And I was just going
Wow.
to focus on consulting. But then I realized if I walk away from it, there's people that need me and my type of coaching. And I felt like I was leaving a piece of me behind. And the more I fought, the more I realized that what I'm doing is just a part of my calling. And I don't have my own business. And so people are like, who are you to give business advice? But to know my story is to know that I've worked with organizations and businesses since I was 7. Because of my conditions and my disability, I get sold to. I need a service, I need equipment, I need staff, I need all kinds of things. And so people would come to my house and sit at my kitchen table and do business with my mom and I. And you learn about people that way. And you learn about how businesses do things. And you learn about what works and what doesn't, and what feels good and what doesn't. And I learned that from a young age. And so when I had the opportunity to work in nonprofit mental health, I learned a little more about the ins and outs of how things work, and going over deliverables and making sure that our clients' needs were met. And then I dove down the rabbit hole of compliance. So my journey is colorful, and it is very, very against the grain because I offer free services, and I have to treat what I do as more of a hobby than a business. But I'm smart, and I want to be able to help people serve others in the best way possible, and to protect the future of an industry that I love so very much, because people have been so grateful to receive help. And I think the other thing is I provided services in person, and there's such a different dynamic when you have that additional relational aspect of being face to face with people, and them thanking you and giving you a hug. I had one lady bring me a watermelon. She had nothing, but she
Bless.
brought me a watermelon to thank me. And that is humanity. That to me is like, that's what's good. That's the good I want to focus on, because I do believe that it still exists out there and that it didn't have to be a transaction. It was just help.
Who do you tend to focus and want to work with the most or build relationships with the most? I want the listeners to be really clear. We understand your core values and where you're going, what your beliefs are, but who is it you help and what can you help them with?
Well, I have a few different offers. And the first thing that I help people with on an individual level is getting started, because there's a lot of times where people get lost in the startup phase, where they're asking questions and they're not getting answers that align with what their needs are. Or maybe the answers are for someone who is 10 steps ahead already. There's a lot of pressure to work with people who are already established. So I kind of liken it to a train car, right? So everybody likes to go and work with people, the cars in the middle, right in the middle and right towards the back, because like it's there, it's built, it's carrying its own weight. And what happens to the people in the front? We talk about how people are not ready, or sometimes we use the word tire kickers, which I wish we didn't. But I understand why. But I hope that we give people a chance and provide them with solid information so that they can make informed decisions, rather than just talking from a place of, this is the thing you need. Well, how do you know that I need it? How do you know that it fits my business model or my needs as a coach, without even taking more than 5 minutes to get to know me outside of a few Facebook comments on a post? And to be able to say, I have the exact thing that you need, that increases risk, but it is a taught thing, and I understand that. So that's something that I enjoy helping people with, is getting started from a solid footing. And then the other things that I have helped people with are ethical considerations in coaching. And to disclaim, I don't mean that I'm a lawyer or that I provide legal advice, but sometimes people will come to me and ask me, I had a situation with a client and I don't feel like I can serve them anymore and I'm feeling uncomfortable. What should I do? And so we'll talk over an approach. And I don't necessarily provide answers. I help people come to a conclusion or a solution that feels good for them to be able to deliver to someone else themselves. And then I do work with some organizations on a volunteer basis, and I help them establish trauma-informed practices in their businesses and to meet the needs of their clients and to get trained in certain situations to understand what is happening inside their clients' bodies when they're trying to provide services and support. And that goes for education for both staff and the organization as a whole.
And I love that term, what's happening inside of their bodies, because a lot of people would just say what's happening inside of their head. But as we know, it's far beyond. The central nervous system isn't just the head, right?
Yeah. And
So,
all of it's done on a volunteer basis, because
wow.
because I can't work full time. I can't even always guarantee part time with how I feel and where my condition might take me day to day. But I do what I can, and I have systems in place to make sure that I can do it, and I modify when I need to. And that's another thing that I hope people learn is it's okay to be different. It's okay to have a different approach, especially for those of us who don't fit the standard mold. There's a lot of pressure to do things in a very rigid and structured way, and to be always hustling. And if you're not hustling and you're not doing X, Y, and Z, then you won't find success or fulfillment. But it's possible, even in small bits. People need help. And if you could be that help for one person, even in just a small way, it really does make a difference.
And I think that embodies exactly what you are, what you're about, and how you help. And it's wonderful to hear it again. We've been connected for quite a while, and we're both in the similar space of calling out what's good, what's bad, and just doing our own thing unapologetically. We're very different in what we do, but we're just doing our own thing in our own way and trying to make that impact, trying to make a difference, trying to either start a movement or change something about the industry or the way in which people act within it. And I think that's a strong and powerful message to get out there, the fact that it's okay to be different. You don't have to go along with what everybody's saying that you have to do. What's the best way of contacting you, Jennifer? Is it via your website or one of your socials? What's the best way for people to reach out?
I have a Beacons profile, which I will give you to link, and they can always follow me on Facebook or just to read my content and see if somebody they vibe with, and if they feel led to send a friend request. I'm all for that, because I like to build relationships first, and there's no financial stakes for me here. I just want to help people.
And in the show notes, I'll make sure that we've got any of the links that you want to share and anything that you want to put publicly available for people to contact. We've covered a lot today. We've covered the good, the bad, I guess the risks in the coaching industry. And again, just to caveat it, we're not pointing at any particular people or coaching companies or training companies. It's more of an observation of the way things are going. And look, while there are some real problems that I think both Jennifer and I think that there are in the industry, I think it's important to remember that not all coaching is bad. Far from it. There's many coaches out there that do absolutely immensely incredible work with honesty, with integrity, using the right skills, the right tools at the right time, have fantastic customer relationships. So it isn't our goal with the discussion that we've had today to tear down coaching. Far from it. We consider ourselves part of that community. But we do want people to be aware so that they can make better choices. You can have some of those things in the back of your mind for if you're a coach or a mentor, for how you conduct your own actions and the way that you speak to clients and prospects. And if you're somebody looking to work with a coach, we hope that some of the things that we've covered today perhaps gives you a little bit of awareness of things that you should or could perhaps look for or question. Look for transparency. Trust your gut. And we all just hope that things will start to steer back a little bit more to being a little bit more honest, ethical, client-centered, client-led, with the right communication and the right relationships being built within the industry. That's where we need to be. So all that's left really is to thank my fantastic guest, Jennifer. Look, insightful again. Every time we speak, you bring more insights and more examples. So thank you so much for being on today. And to everybody listening, hope it's been interesting for you, and we'll see you on the next episode. That's it for this episode of Coach Fireside Chat. If you found value in today's episode, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an insight-packed conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more real talk on coaching. And don't stop there. Check out other fantastic episodes where I sit down with more incredible coaches who are out there making a real impact. Thanks for tuning in.